there will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job. The AI will be able to do everything.
AI could wipe out half of all entry-level white-collar jobs in the next 1 to 5 years.
I'm about to graduate college, and I'm so worried there's going to be no jobs left for me.
Welcome to AI Unplugged, the future of work, unlocking the promise and peril of the algorithmic age.
Well, welcome to the last episode of Season 1 of AI Unplugged. I'm here with my partner, Deval Patrick, and we are thrilled to do a recap of what we've learned through all these really intense and exciting conversations that we've had over the past several weeks. We're going to try to go through the 7 most important topics that came up, and we're going to try to do it in rapid fire. Do you think we can do this?
We will soon see.
All right. Why don't we jump right into this? So one of the topics that came up is this idea that AI is sort of happening to us. Some people describe AI as sort of this phenomenon divorced from human agency. And yet many of our guests, I'm thinking of Brian Deese, for example, who's saying, you hear a lot about inevitability, like there's some law of gravity that's driving AI, but in fact, It's really us. We can shape it. How do you feel about that? Certainly there are moments where I feel like it's happening to me.
First of all, I hope it's true. I think there are some need for thoughtfulness in terms of how we deploy AI for good. And I don't think, though I don't think today, having listened to our guests, starting with Brian Deese, that we need to be victims of our future, that instead we can shape the future we want. The question that I keep asking our guests, myself, is who is responsible for shaping that future? Is it the manufacturers? Is it employers in the case of the workplace? What's the role of employees? Is it investors? Is it government? And at what level? And how do you get the most out of AI so that we get the most meaning out of our lives and our production and productivity? And I think that question was raised by Brian in really important ways.
And David Autor said a very memorable phrase: "The future is not a forecasting exercise; it's a design exercise." But I guess you're calling the question, Deval, who are the designers? Who do we trust?
David Autor was our second guest. Automation versus augmentation. He talked about a fork in the road. Is this about replacing all of us, or is it about augmenting what we do and making it more effective and our ability to do more of what we do? And I love that way of thinking about it. Again, I'm just struggling with who's working on this, because we get so much of the hurry up and deploy AI, hurry up and invest in AI kind of narrative from so many other.
Well, Eric Brynjolfsson described something called the Turing trap. The Turing effect is when people can't distinguish between a human or a machine. He said that one of the biggest mistakes we could make is trying to make machines that closely mimic humans. It's a terrible economic idea. It drives down the value of labor, so it's a terrible social idea. His view is that there's a much bigger opportunity out there. But I think, how do we make sure that all of us who have input on this is a little bit like the impact investing question. How do we all lend a hand in making this the future that we want?
Well, and how do we know it's working with some measure that's better than we'll know it when we see it? Today, for example, if you are dealing with a bot in a customer service chat for a service, an airliner, it's okay. It's not really great, at least in my experience. What I want to do is get to the live agent as fast as possible.
If you just keep pressing 0, you just hammer 0 harder. Eventually, you'll get there.
Eventually, the bot's going to say, "You idiot, would you stop pressing 0?" But I think the question is, experience with customer service feels like you are dealing with a human being. That's one thing. But right now, we still have a sense of when we need human interaction. And how we keep that human in the loop is a big challenge.
So, first theme, this inevitability theme. The second, augmentation. I think the third issue I wanted to take on is, we heard about the parallel between AI and globalization. I remember when I was an economics student in college, and there's sort of this idea that, okay, we'll offshore all the manufacturing stuff and then everybody will have much better jobs. That theory didn't quite play out. And you made the point just a minute ago, we can't just wait to see how this plays out.
No, really, Warren, this is a serious point. When there are disruptions in the labor market, in the economy, in policy, we almost always wait for the consequences and then pick up the pieces. I know that AI is developing really fast. But if you think about it as an augmentation, how you want to deploy AI, again, not to replace people, but how to make those jobs more meaningful so that people can pay attention to the thing, in the case of healthcare workers, the actual care of people rather than the paperwork.
As our friend Mike O'Leary describes many healthcare companies, he says they're really paperwork companies with clinics attached.
To do is look at the experience you have and I have and everybody else has when they have the opportunity to see a medical professional.
David Autor said, changes in the labor market are really hard for people to adjust to. And I remember David Siegel saying, you don't want to sit here and start regulating for every negative possibility. What role does government have? Government didn't do a great job of dealing with globalization, and this might all be happening faster.
We ought to be careful about painting with too broad a brush. I think that I wouldn't say government didn't do a good job in dealing with globalization. Just government's response was uneven. There were communities hollowed out by manufacturing moving elsewhere. We created a tax incentive program and other incentives that just made it kind of crazy not to offshore. We ought to internalize those lessons and think about what we want AI to do and what the impact will be. And I think as a former policymaker, the point is well taken that we can't try to regulate against every negative possibility. That's impossible. But what are the values-based parameters? Mary Kay made this point Mary Kay Henry in one of our episodes about the dignity and meaning of work, that the notion of a life of leisure or a life of adrift is not actually satisfying to most people. We want to be useful. I think we want to be useful. To how do we build that into how we think about deploying AI?
This question here of dignity of work. One of my favorite things that Mary Kay said was, "A substitute for working is not going to feed the human spirit." I think that was a quote from her. And the truth of the matter is, we all want this natural desire to create, to contribute in some way. And the cool thing about doing it with AI today is you can create things faster, and you can have an outsized impact if you direct your energy the right way. At the tender age of 52, I managed to build my own agentic bots to organize my own workflows.
Look at you.
And my team's response was, "You're only 52?" Anyway, that's the kind of respect that I command.
You got to get an AI friend who's a little more respectful than your team.
People also want to feel heard. So this brings us to the sort of fifth thing, which flows directly out of the dignity thing that we were just talking about. Worker voice as a design principle.
Not a side effect and not an afterthought. This whole question of who's at the table when systems are designed. What are the insights that you lose or you miss when you exclude frontline workers? How many senior executives actually understand what the frontline worker does? If you engage that worker on the front end in the design, they could make the design better and clear away the clutter of the things that get in the way of the meaning of the job. Gets more fulfillment from it.
I don't think companies trying to deploy AI effectively in organizations are going to succeed without worker, not just participation, but in some amount of buy-in.
Yeah.
The returns to being able to do AI quickly in your company are going to be enormous. Mm-hmm. Point one. And point two, the key dependency is about people. It's actually not about technology. So don't approach AI as a technology problem. Approach it as a people problem.
Yes. Well, indeed, not necessarily as a problem, as an opportunity. Yeah. I think it's a very fresh and encouraging way to think about capitalism, to think about leadership among capitalists. Jumping ahead to our sixth episode, very much related to the conversation we had with Mary Kay Henry, with Rachel Korberg, who talked about how inequality is not a side effect. It's not a happenstance. It's a choice. We can choose to share the productivity gains that come from the use of AI with the people who help to make that AI better. We can do that. It doesn't all have to be hoarded by some. And she warned, I quote, is given the current path we're on, it definitely risks increasing racial and economic inequity. How can we possibly wish for more of that?
Well, David Autor, who did say if all the gains go to the owners of AI, I don't want to live in that world. No matter how much, guaranteed annual income there might be, I really do think that the winners in this game are going to be the folks who put employees in really truly good jobs and strong leadership first. But that's not going to mean there isn't a disruption. There's still going to be a disruption. I do think there's got to be a role for policy. But in terms of my role as a board member or as an investor, trying to help companies a sort of this sort of blunt force of we're just going to replace workers with bots. Like if you look at it that way, I think you miss so much opportunity, and I actually don't think you're going to succeed. There's a social thing and a practical thing that sing in harmony, which is nice.
That's an impact investor speaking right there, when you find the intersection of those goods. Listen, I think we're going to have to, using our own influence or just our observation, find those early examples of workplaces where management and the workers are coming together to get the most out of AI. And we need to elevate those examples so that people see this isn't a hypothetical thing. It actually can be done and ought to be done.
And do you feel like we as investors have a sufficient mandate to help to do experiments in that regard, sharing the gains of AI? It's wonderful that even companies like KKR are doing that now. They're pioneering things like Ownership Works. Do you feel like we've got enough permission as fiduciaries to do what we need to do to make that happen?
I think it's there is plenty of evidence that sharing the gains on the upside, and there are a variety of ways of doing that, enhance the overall value of the enterprise. And that's our job as fiduciaries is to maximize a sustained value over time. I think we've been able to show that you don't have to trade return for impact. And when we have intentionally created those examples, we need to be talking about them.
Absolutely. We've talked about agency, augmentation versus automation, globalization, the dignity of work, worker voice. And we've talked a bit about this idea of inequality. But I want to close with perhaps the largest idea in all of this, which is our guest David Siegel said, think of AI as a tool for problem solving. We should desperately identify the problems that need to be solved and decide when is AI the right tools.
Yes.
Use this incredibly powerful tool as a problem-solving mechanism. And when you hear it framed that way, it feels like there's a lot to be optimistic about. First of all, do you think that's an appropriate framing? And second of all, are you optimistic about where this is all going?
Well, for me, the answer conflates, Warren. If AI is used that way, can be used that way, then I'm very optimistic. Because I think of the number of big challenges, the complex problems that I feel personally are just too complicated to solve and haven't been solved because they are so big. How could we apply AI to those problems? And could AI actually solve by looking at a tremendous amount of data that I don't have a lifetime to evaluate and making some suggestions, giving us some insights on different ways to go forward? For example, we talk all time in the policy world and have for decades about the size of government. It's too big, it's too small, it's too this or not enough of that. We don't start with what is it we want government to do? What do we want and not do, right? What does that actually cost? And what's the most efficient way and reasonable and fair way to pay for that? So if you just think about something that we have near universal experience with, like the IRS, what is the model for simplifying interactions with the IRS for taxpayers and businesses? How do you think about an equitable, fair, very simple tax code that also enables us to fund what it is we want government to do? Just sort of back to basics, looking at the layers upon layers upon layers of policy choices that we've made over the decades. So how could you use AI to help us kind of crack some of that code?
Well, it's interesting. I want to go back to one of the things you said, which was if we can all agree on the problems that need to get solved, and the problems, the ones that sit squarely in the middle of all the things we like to fight about, but the ones that we can all agree on. I think we can all agree that we would like to have a workforce that feels as fulfilled and it's treated as fairly as possible. I think we'd all like to live in a world where the gains of technology are shared. If we can take those problems and put them front and center, maybe then pointing AI at them can actually prove the point and make this cause for optimism kind of evident. I will say, whenever I have a question like this, I go and I ask AI now what AI thinks. And so I just asked AI, who should make sure AI is primarily used as a problem-solving tool? And here's what it said. Ultimately, everyone involved should help ensure AI is used primarily as a problem-solving tool. But the main responsibility sits with a few key roles: leadership and executives, managers, users and employees. But if you had to pick, leaders are the most important. So we got some work to do, Deval. We've learned a lot over the past number of weeks from our wonderful guests and the conversations that I've had the pleasure of having with you, Deval. As I would like to continue as we look ahead to the potential for future seasons by doing two things. The first is really getting underneath what progress and a positive impact could look like. Mm-hmm. And second, bringing more people who are directly affected by AI into the discussion. The people whose jobs are changing, the people whose jobs may even be going away, the students who are graduating into a world that's changing as fast as it is. Try to bring those people into the dialogue so that we can add some voice to what progress could be, positive progress could look like.
I love that, Warren. It's been so illuminating for me to spend the time with our guests, but also with you. Your curiosity and your determination to get to the right answer for the larger society is just an inspiration, and it's been a pleasure.
Well, that's all from us. We hope you'll join us in season 2 in the coming months. But for now, it's goodbye from my partner, Deval.
And goodbye from my partner, Warren Valdmanis. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.